For this video, I'm going to be talking about a specific cartoon series. It's one of the longest running of animated series. Some people like it, some people don't. I personally love it, and I'm very much a fan of it. I'm talking about Super Friends, which recently turned 43 years old. Again, it's one of the longest running animated series with DC superheroes. Has a total of 109 episodes. Long before there was Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, there was Super Friends. Both very different shows with different tones. You know, I enjoyed Justice League and Justice League Unlimited for what they were and what they did. However, I'm still very much a fan of Super Friends. And I'm going to be talking about this series for this video. I'm going to be, I have my notes on the side, so if you, I pause for a minute, that's to change my, page and whatnot. Before I talk about this show, I'm going to be talking about some elements that have to do with this series and some elements that contributed to the making of this show. And to start off with, I'm going to be talking about 60s Filmation, which had one of the earliest TV superhero shows, starting off with the 60s Filmation Superman series. You know, the beginning of their, production company and the beginning of their DC superhero animated run. And they also did a Aquaman series. And in between episodes of Superman and Aquaman, they would have animated shorts. And, these shorts would have such heroes as the Atom, the Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, and there would also be some Superboy animated shorts. And, they would, come in between the Superman and Aquaman episodes. And also, Filmation had 3 Teen Titans shorts. Long before there was a Teen Titans Go, Filmation had a Teen Titans series. Or at least stories, with 3 episodes. And these shorts had the team of Aquaboy, Wonder Girl, Kid Flash, and Speedy. At this time, Filmation did not have the rights for Robin, but it's still the classic Silver Age team. And as I talked about previously, it's not until the late 60s that Filmation was able to get Batman. Now, during the 60s with these shorts, Filmation had 3 Justice League of America cartoons. And here, as we can see, the team consisted of Superman, Hawkman, Atom, Green Lantern, and the Flash. Now, although Aquaman did appear in the title sequence, he never actually appeared in the actual episodes themselves. And as we're, going to be talking about soon, the poor guy can't get a break. Anyways, the Filmation had 3 animated JLA shorts, which were Between Two Armies, Target Earth, and Bad Day on Black Mountain. The first story has the Justice League battling 2 armies, as the title kind of implies. The Crystal Men of Mercury, yes, 60s cartoons and Silver Age stuff here. Anyways, the Crystal Men of Mercury are fighting the Rock People, and the JLA teams together and stops their battle. The second story, the Warlord Romnex is about to attack the Earth, and the Justice League join together to defeat him. In the last story, we have the villain Mastermind, who knows the secret identities of the superheroes, and is causing multiple disasters and wants to take over the world. The heroes have to try to stop him, and, through their efforts, they're able to put an end to his schemes. So those were the 3, animated shorts with Justice League, which, again, came before Super Friends. So this was the first animated, viewing of the Justice League of America with the team that I've previously mentioned. And with Super Friends, I feel, as with the Filmation 60s animation, that it's classic Silver Age DC Comics. And if you look at DC Comics during the Silver Age, you see this type of storytelling that is in tone with these cartoons. And you see how similar they are when you watch the cartoons and read the comics. And that the Filmation is doing things that is in tone with, Silver Age comics. And by far, Super Friends is the biggest contribution Hanna-Barbera brought to TV of DC superheroes. Again, Filmation had early DC cartoons in the 60s, and Hanna-Barbera has the Super Friends. They had previously done Fantastic Four, and they had their own original superheroes, but this is their longest running DC, superhero show. And one of the complaints about Super Friends is that the characters are interchangeable, that the voices are interchangeable, that the lines can be spoken by any character. Sometimes some people say that the characters are not at their full strengths, such as Superman, such as Aquaman. Now, I'm going to address this in a minute. First, let me say that this series that Hanna-Barbera is presenting is an older style of how to do cartoons and how to do comic book heroes. Granted, in the comics, the characters such as Batman was getting more serious, especially in the 70s and the 80s, etc. However, it should be remembered that cartoons of the time had to be lighter in tone, especially with parent groups breathing down the necks of the networks. In fact, early cartoons, such as the animated Batman series, you could have a character who would sometimes punch people, and you would have action stories. And, that later on with something like Super Friends, you have a more adventure-focused storyline. That, the heroes are using their powers, but they're less likely to throw a punch. And, so Super Friends is more about a show of adventure than fighting. And again, this is largely due to the parent groups. Now, Hanna-Barbera's very first attempt to have a DC superhero were two appearances of Batman in the Scooby-Doo movies, of which ran, this series, Scooby-Doo movies, ran from 1972 to 73. And it's, Ulan Sewell and Casey Kasem, who voiced Batman and Robin in the Filmation series, returned to do Batman and Robin for these two animated episodes, and they would return for the early episodes of Super Friends. So that's the background of early Filmation heroes. But before we talk about Super Friends themselves, let's talk about the comics that inspired them. And if you read any early Silver Age Justice League of America comic, as written by Gardner Fox, you get, Silver Age classic comics. Read these issues, then watch Super Friends, and you see that there's a very similarity between the two. That there's, same type of elements are being presented with these two things. That what is presented here is kind of the same as what was being presented here. And, You want to talk about characters that are interchangeable, lines that can be spoken by any character, characters that are not at their full strength. That's kind of exactly what Fox has here. Because what he's doing here is he's playing up various different characters to appease different fans. So say you're a Batman fan. Fox will give Batman a little spotlight. If you're a Superman fan, Fox will give him a spotlight onto his own. Each character gets his own moment. With Fox, what happens is to one person affects the whole team. It's not an individual effort, it's a team effort. And they work well together to solve a problem. Sometimes they separate into groups to deal with the problem. There will be teams of 2 superheroes that go off together and they deal with something. And, sometimes they divide up into teams of 2 or 3 heroes to, solve a problem. So, Fox is working out various ways to show how a team works together. And he does it quite well. Often in Fox's story, a character speaks with a common voice. So before you go and say that Super Friends is interchangeable characters, respect that's what Gardner Fox is presenting. And he's doing this for a reason. Because he is presenting a group of heroes, he has to be respectful of the fans of an individual character. He is respecting the Superman fan, the Batman fan, the Green Lantern fan, and so on and so forth. Fox is trying to please everyone at the same time, and he's doing it well. I think that's the spirit of Super Friends that's being presented. If you want to talk about superheroes not at their full strength, as they may be in their own title, let's talk about how Fox presents Martian Manhunter. Now, Martian Manhunter in his own, well, he actually didn't have his own comic at the time. Martian Manhunter had stories that were backup stories in Detective Comics. In those stories, Martian Manhunter had, powers such as shape-changing, invisibility, and mind reading. But in Justice League, he's kind of more of a knockoff of Superman. He'll have the Martian hearing or, the Martian breath and so on. The only basic Martian Manhunter element he has is that he can't be around fire. He's very much an imitation of Superman for the most part in these comics. But, we see here that a character is not the same in this team book as he may be in his own title. Just as maybe Aquaman is not presenting his full strength as Superman, Super Friends, he is maybe more presented as full strength in his own series. And, overall, the Silver Age Justice League of America comics, it's about having fun and having adventures. That's what, the Super Friends is. We have an analog here of early Silver Age comics and Super Friends. The same type of spirit that's being carried on between these two. And, that's maybe the reason for this. That, after all, to write a story with it's hard to write a story with multiple characters. It's tough. And sometimes shows struggle with that. Justice League Unlimited, they, had a vast majority of DC's characters to pull from. And they had to work very hard to present them in an effective way. And And they managed to do it quite well. You know, maybe not for, you know, their very first outing. Because even the creators admit that they did not present Superman in the best light, that he was at his full strength here. And, you know, again, I can't emphasize this enough. Super Friends is Silver Age comics. It is what Gardner Fox presented in Justice League of America during the 60s. It's comics brought to screen. And I feel that should be respected. Now, let us address the Aquaman issue. Aquaman gets a bad rap. And it's a shame, because he is a powerful superhero. I mean, his body can withstand the pressures of the deep ocean. And, you know, he's quite strong. Geoff Johns shows Aquaman as a powerful character. And, you know, what he's saying is that Aquaman is not cool now. It's that it was always cool. You know, he's not showing that, hey, you know, that right now Aquaman's cool. Right this moment. No, he's saying Aquaman was always cool. You just need to realize that. You know, that's what Geoff Johns was writing. And, you know, Aquaman has this mythical element about him, especially during the Silver Age. You know, now while a hero like Superman and Batman would guard one city, while the Justice League of America would guard part of the world, or at least the land portion of the world, Aquaman is guarding the other half of the world. Because the other half of the world is the ocean, which is a large part of our planet. And Aquaman is the ruler of the seven seas. Now, with Super Friends, I would say in early seasons that he's treated well. You know, it's later on that he becomes less powerful. You know, and again, if you feel that Hanna-Barbera doesn't treat Aquaman well, then watch the Filmation animated series with him, which is a very good animated series. You know, because how well it shows Aquaman and how well it respects him. You know, and again, I would say early on, Super Friends treat Aquaman well, but maybe not always in later seasons. You know, in early seasons, he contributes very much to the story, and he puts in a lot of effort. You know, he's doing quite well. You know, later on, maybe not so well, and maybe that's the fault of the writers. But however, I would say that sometimes in Super Friends, a hero like, say, Superman, and excuse me if I sometimes get Superman and Super Friends mixed up here, as you'll notice. Anyways, a character like Superman, you know, he may not always be at his full strength in Super Friends as he is in his own cartoons or comic book title. You know, and that's, you know, as we've talked about, is common with Silver Age, you know, Justice League, as we previously discussed with Martian Manhunter. But, you know, again, just watch this series if you want a good Aquaman series and to see how he is on his own. But anyways, I think we've covered enough background and other elements. Let's talk about this show itself. This show is about the DC superheroes who are family friendly. After all, it's Super Friends. It's superheroes that are your friends. It's superheroes that are friends together and work together. You know, they set examples to kids everywhere. And that's common with TV shows at the time. So, let us talk about the first season. And this season ran from 1973 to 1974. The very first episode premiered on September 8th in 1973. You know, a year before I was born. And we have the basic set of superheroes. We have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman. We also have, as we see here, Robin. Even though he's in comics more with the Teen Titans. You know, he's very much a large part of Super Friends. And, you know, for the first seasons, these heroes appear and they work together. And again, it's more family-friendly action. So for this series, we get my least favorite characters. That is Wendy, Marvin, and Wonder Dog. Now, some people like them. You know, I'm just not a fan of them. That's everyone has their own opinion. This is mine. Now, Wonder Dog is a typical Hanna-Barbera Scooby-Doo knockoff. You know, Hanna-Barbera had a lot of these type of dogs in their shows. You know, it's quite common. It was kind of a mandate. And Wendy and Marvin, again, they're not interesting to me as other characters will be later on. But again, some people like them. They're more, you know, kind of kids in training, being trained by the superheroes. We also get the Hall of Justice. And this is my personal favorite. It's my personal favorite superhero headquarters. Now, since we have more adventure-focused stories, we don't get so much villains for this first series, but we get misguided scientists or misguided aliens. You know, we may get greedy people, but it's people that are doing things, and it's, well, you know, if they had been doing things for a greater good rather than their own selfish reasons type of message. You know, and again, this is part of the parent group Strong Arm. And the cartoons try to present a more family elements. And again, you know, Ulan Sewell and Casey Kasem returning for, you know, Batman and Robin. Superman had previously appeared in the Max Fleischer cartoons and in the Filmation cartoons. Wonder Woman had the one appearance on Brady Bunch before this series. And in point of fact, in Super Friends, we get her invisible jet or invisible plane, and this is probably the most usage we get out of this. You know, more than any other franchise. We see it more here than anywhere else. Or, well, I should say C in parentheses there. Anyways, we get the invisible jet, and it's shown quite often here. Also, we get our first superhero guest appearance in the form of Plastic Man in one of these episodes. Plastic Man, he's an older Golden Age superhero, and it's quite later on that he would get his own animated series by Ruby Spears, you know, as we see here. And he's a very weird and strange character. You probably have seen him in episodes of Batman Brave and the Bold. For this first season, we get Ted Knight as the narrator, as he previously was narrator on early Filmation cartoons. You know, and overall, I would say this first season was done quite well. Now, sometime later, after this series, we get the second series, which is All New Super Friends. And that ran from 1977 to 1978. And here we get a different format. We also get a new narrator, Bill Woodson, who would narrate until at least Legendary Superpowers. which is the second to last season. And he has the classic catchphrase, meanwhile at the Hall of Justice. We also get my personal favorite, the Wonder Twins. While, some may not like the Wonder Twins, I personally do. And, I prefer them over, Wendy and Marvin. They're very much a classic element of Super Friends. They're original characters made for the show. And again, some people like them, some people don't. Again, everybody has their own opinion. I personally appreciate the Wonder Twins and what they bring to the table. Now, for this season, we have the main set of characters: Superman, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman. We also get some guest characters showing up. We get a brief appearance from the Flash. We get a few appearances of Rima the Jungle Girl, who had her own comics for a while, and which weren't successful. She has 2 appearances in this season, and 1 appearance later on. Now, also with this season, we get the one and only appearance of Green Arrow, who's introduced as a staunch member of the Justice League. And it's not until Justice League Unlimited that we would see Green Arrow in an animated series. Also in All New Super Friends, we get a guest appearance from Hawkman and Hawkgirl. We get Atom and Green Lantern. And all these characters are regular Justice League of America members in comics. Here, they are guest stars and would continue to guest star in later seasons. Now, this series also introduced new characters to the DC Universe. And these are the ethnic heroes. That is Apache Chief, Samurai, and Black Vulcan. Now, these characters, they'll have kind of the same powers as some other characters in DC Universe, but here they're the more unique characters. They're, have their own powers and personalities and whatnot. Now, again, it's an effort to bring diversity to the JLA. And I should mention that sometimes in narration of the team is either referred to as the Justice League or the Super Friends. It goes back and forth. Anyways, we have new ethnic characters being introduced here to the Justice League. Yes, maybe it's a little ham-fisted, but whatever. It's an attempt, and I respect it for that. With this season, we get some new villains, and these are typical cartoon baddies. Out to, cause havoc. They're not so much, could be reformed characters. When we get 2 appearances of 2 comic book villains here. We get appearance from Gentleman Ghost, and we get Black Manta. Although here, he's just called Manta, and for some reason, his suit is colored brown. And with this season, we get a new format. The first story would be the introductory story, where we have 2 heroes in the story, and they work together to solve a mystery or have an adventure. Then we have a Wonder Twins story, and they, would help a teenager who's in trouble and whatnot. Then we have a 2-part segment with the entire team. Then we finish up with another team up. And usually this would be a main cast member teaming up with a guest cast. A new character that's being introduced, such as Hawkman and so on, as I previously mentioned. And they work together to solve a problem. Now, in between these segments, we have the PSA moment, the public service announcement moment. It's kind of silly, but it is what it is. I understand what they're trying to do here. It's a common element in cartoons of this era. So we get the public service announcement era. Moments. We have the arts and crafts moment. We have the magic trick moment. We have the puzzle moment, and also often the puzzle word game is wrapped around the two-parter segment. But again, we have the family-friendly elements. I appreciate for what it is, me personally. Then, for season 3, which ran from 78 to 79, we get a season divided up into 2 portions, which I will talk about respectively. First, let's talk about one of the more classic elements of the show. That is Challenge of the Super Friends. Here we have classic comic book superhero versus classic comic book villain. Here, the Super Friends fight the Legion of Doom. We get Lex Luthor and a set of comic book villains. That is, Black Manta, who returns here. We get Bizarro, Cheetah, Sinestro, Gorilla Grodd, Toyman, Giganta, Solomon Grundy, Brainiac, Captain Cold, Scarecrow, and the Riddler. And these characters, in each episode, they're trying to take over the world. And the Super Friends have to stop them. So we get classic comic book hero fighting comic book villain. And, for this season, we have the return of Apache Chief, Black Vulcan, and Samurai, who are working on a regular basis with the DC heroes. Now, with Super Friends, we get a set of villains who are at their best, or rather their worst, if you will. Hanna-Barbera wanted to get Joker in, but they weren't able to use him. He'll pop up at least once later on. And as I've once before talked about, because this series has Riddler and Scarecrow, the 77 Filmation animated series could not use those characters. And as talked about before, in the title sequence here, Riddler gets a different color costume. And, so Scarecrow and Riddler could not be in this series, even though they were part of the earlier Filmation series. And because Casey Kasem and Ulan Sul were busy here, they could not appear in this animated series. So this Filmation got, for this series, Adam West and Burt Ward. And, we get this sort of rights issues with characters not being able to cross over and whatnot. Anyways, for this season, we have Superman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern having their origins shown, as well as Lex Luthor. And overall, I would say Challenge is a great place to start with Super Friends, even though it's the 3rd season. It's very classic DC superhero fare. It's one of the best of the seasons. It's classic Super Friends. Now, the second portion of the program, we have stories that mainly focus with the Super Friends working with the Wonder Twins. We don't get the other characters, the ethnic characters, and so on in this portion. We mainly get the main set team and the Wonder Twins. And we also don't get comic book villains with here. We get original villains, and we get more adventures and so on. The Super Friends are often stopping invaders and mad scientists. But we do get an appearance from Mr. Mxyzptlk, who will appear on and off in future episodes of Super Friends. So at least one comic book villain. I should correct myself there. So that is, the two-part portion of the third season, the classic challenge of Super Friends, and the second portion that again has the Wonder Twins portion that work together. Both 16 episodes. I believe they were running at the same time. First a challenge episode, then the regular Super Friends episode. Now for the fourth series, we get World's Greatest Super Friends, which is much shorter season. In fact, it's only recently that it was produced as DVD format. And it was transmitted from 1979 to 1980. And probably the reason why it took a while for this to come out, it's probably because of stories such as the Lord of Middle Earth and Planet Oz. Things that are properties of other franchises, such as Wizard of Oz and so on. But this, shorter season, we have the basic core heroes with the Wonder Twins, and the return of the original heroes, with appearances with Lex Luthor and so on, having various adventures and so on. Then we get the fifth season, which was in 1980, and the first story would have the episodes here were divided in three-part segments. The first segment would have a team-up story, the second would have a Wonder Twin story, and the third would have another team-up story. Apache Chief, Black Vulcan, and Samurai would return once more. Green Lantern, Atom, Hawkman, and Hawkgirl would show up as guests here off and on, as they would in later seasons. Then, for the sixth season of Super Friends, which came out in 1981, we have the continuing format of a collection of shorts. And we have, with this season, the sixth, the first appearance of the other ethnic superhero, that is El Dorado. He appears in 2 shorts for this season. And he kind of has the same powers as Martian Manhunter. Again, talk about one character being an imitation of another character. As I talked about, Justice League, Martian Manhunter being an imitation of Superman. Here, it's El Dorado kind of being an imitation of Martian Manhunter. But that's okay. Anyways, he appears in 2 shorts. And, we have various Super Friends shorts here that are where the team is facing dangers and whatnot. We have the return of various villains from comics, and the Wonder Twins would show up off and on. And we have guest appearances of other ethnic heroes, and other DC heroes. We get Atom again, Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and so forth. Then we have what is called the so-called Lost episode, or Lost season. And, this would, this season didn't appear on air right away. It was made around 1983. And it's not later until this was made. It's a collection of 24 shorts for this season. And it's not until later reruns and repeats of the regular season that these episodes are shown. But we get here some interesting stories, the return of the Legion of Doom, and return of other characters. We get 2 appearances again of El Dorado, as well as the other ethnic heroes and other DC heroes, and so forth. Now, last, but certainly not least, the last 2 seasons of Super Friends. And these two series, I know I saw on TV. The previous seasons, I probably saw more in repeats and reruns and DVD. These two I know I saw when they were on air at the time, so I'm more familiar with them. And for that reason, it's my favorite run of this series. Now, to start off with, there is Super Friends, the legendary Superpowers show. And this ran from 1984 to 1985. And we have the core team appearing as well as the ethnic heroes. And here we see that Aquaman is being pushed in the background. But again, if you feel that Super Friends is not treating Aquaman well, just watch his Filmation series. Anyways, point is, Aquaman is a good character and, should be respected. Anyways, for this season, we get a new character. And this time, we get an actual DC comic book character rather than an original character. And that is Firestorm, who had recently appeared in the 80s. And with this series, we get the classic Firestorm. We get Dr. Stein and Ronnie Raymond, who joined together to become Firestorm. Now, Ulan Sool, who had been the voice of Batman for early seasons and for, the Filmation series, had stepped down from voicing Batman for this season. And that is probably due to his age. I mean, he was in his 70s at the time. He would voice Dr. Stein, who's kind of more of a minor character. So, it's probably less demanding to voice this character as opposed to Batman. Casey Kasem is still Robin for this series, and it would be Robin for, the entirety of the show. But for this series, we get Adam West voicing Batman. Just as he voiced Batman in the Filmation 77 series. He would return here. And again, with this season, we get the introduction of Firestorm. Lex Luthor returns. We get to see Mirror Master, a Flash villain, for the first time in animated form. And Mixoplex would make a return. Now, we almost got Toyman for this series, but we didn't due to a rights issue. And instead, it's changed to, the doll maker. But he's working at a factory that Winslow shot a toy factory, which, as you know, in comics, Toyman is Winslow Shot. So anyways, we get kind of a new character who's loosely based off of a comic book character. And we also get the first appearance in anime form of Darkseid. And this is probably one of the most significant things I remember about this series. Because Darkseid provides a significant threat to the Super Friends. And it's the classic Jack Kirby Darkseid, with his whole pantheon of characters. So we get Desaad and Calabac. Now, we can't get the Parademons, but we do get the Paradrones. We may show fiendish characters serving Darkseid, but we can't say the word demon on a kid's show. But for this series, we have Super Friends in full force, even though, Aquaman is pushed to the background. And, again, in this series, we get the ethnic heroes, and El Dorado appears significantly in 3 episodes working with the main characters. He also had 1 cameo. And, so we get the introduction of comic book characters such as Firestorm and Darkseid. And, we get the 80s look of Brainiac, whereas in Challenge of Super Friends, we get his classic Silver Age look with, legendary powers. We get his 80s look, his kind of Terminator look, his more robotic look for this series and the next series. And this is probably the last we'll get to see of the classic Hall of Justice as it originally was. And it's kind of the last we'll see of many of the characters, including the Wonder Twins. Because for the next series, we get a whole new format. And excuse me 1 second. For the next series, it is the final incarnation of Super Friends, the last season. That is Superpowers Galactic Guardians team. And this season ran from 1985 to 1986. It does not use the Super Friends name, but it's still obviously the same universe, if you will. The Super Friends universe. And in terms of artwork, I feel that this is the best season for animation and artwork. It's the best artwork done in Super Friends. More than any other series. I don't mind the artwork of the earlier seasons, but this series, it's the best artwork. And it's the same tone of artwork that would be shown in the Ruby Spears animated Superman series that came later on in the 80s. And, here we have another DC superhero showing up in this series. We get Cyborg. Long before New 52 had Cyborg, part of the Justice League, Super Friends did it first with him as a team. Apache Chief and Black Vulcan are gone. Samurai would make an appearance, and El Dorado would have a non-speaking cameo. But here we see Firestorm and Cyborg as the new teenage heroes, kind of replacing Wonder Twins. And we have a redesign of the Hall of Justice. And it's stated that it's in Metropolis. Also, for this season, we don't have a narrator, which is something different. And as the title suggests, Galactic Guardians, we get more interstellar stories and adventures. We get, again, Brainiac making a return in his robotic appearance. We get Darkseid returning. We get Lex Luthor. And we also get a classic Justice League long-term villain, Felix Faust. We get the one and only appearance of Penguin. In an earlier season, we had Robber Baron, who is kind of Penguin-light. But for this series, we get, traditional Penguin. Whereas Robber Baron was kind of Penguin without being Penguin. And maybe that's the rights issue. For this season, we get Steve Trevor, who's a long time Wonder Woman character. We get the return of Brainiac. And, briefly, we get the Joker. Now, for the longest time, probably due to a rights issue, Super Friends could not use the Joker. But he makes an appearance here along with the Royal Flush Gang. But I find it unfortunate that for the most part, he doesn't appear in his true with his normal look. He's kind of appearing as another character. It's kind of a shame, but whatever. And it turns out he's working with Darkseid of all people. And I feel that this season ended on a high note, because the last episode is the death of Superman. But of course he doesn't actually die. However, this is one of the early times that we get the idea that Superman could die. Many kids, including myself, were shocked by this, that this could happen. And of course, things are resolved, but it was still shocking at the time. And for this season, we get, for the first time, Batman's origin explained. And for many children, including myself, this is the first time we learned his origin. Now again, we can't say the word gun, and we can't see his parents being shot and killed. But we still get an effective way of showing the origin. You know, previously in Batman shows, such as the Adam West series, the origin is only verbally mentioned, but it's never shown. This is the first time it's been shown on screen. And best of all, in this story, is Scarecrow using the Batman's fear against him, the fear of this origin, and using Batman's fears against him, and we have Batman conquering his fears to face them and overcome them. So, for these last two seasons of Super Friends, they're my favorite because it's what I grew up with, and it's what I knew at the time, and also it's very significant to the viewers. We get Batman's origin, we get for the first time Darkseid, and we get new heroes such as Firestorm and Cyborg, and the possibility that maybe Superman could be hurt or even killed. Now, in conjunction with this last season, in 1984, Kenner was releasing a Super Friends toy line. And I recall some of the figures which also had mini comics, which are kind of the first mini comics for the Super Friends, series. Previously, they did have their own regular comics, and these comics are very much in tone with the animated show. And the comic was being written by E. Nelson Bridwell, and the artwork was being done by Alex Toth. And this comic was first published in 1976, a year before the second season. It is a spin-off of the comic. And this comic ran from the 70s into the early 80s. And the comic starts off with Wendy and Marvin, who leave in issue 9. And we have an origin of the Wonder Twins, which I really enjoyed. I like that. It goes more into the background of the Wonder Twins and how they got their powers and about their planet. And the Wonder Twins appeared in issue 7, which came out in October of 1977. And this is just after the second season had come out. Now, if you read these comic book issues, it's very akin to reading Silver Age Justice League. They're very much similar in tone. So the Super Friends comics has the family-friendly feel to it, and the Silver Age goodness to it. The series also introduces characters that are used later on in comics. This comic, Super Friends, has the first appearance of Global Guardians, who would later appear in a Superman team-up. It also has Dr. Mist, who, again, would appear in later DC Comics. We also get the first appearance of Fire, who's later integrated into DC Comics and would be a Justice League member. Now, for this comic book series, We get references to regular DC comics, such as Teen Titans and other references that I'll get to in a minute. And we have the basic core team: Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Batman, and Robin. And we also get guest cast appearances of Atom, Green Arrow, and many other DC characters show up here. Now, before the Legion of Doom appeared in comics, we have our first villain team up here, where the Penguin has a team of villains who are joining up together. And, they have their own apprentices. So we get, Penguin, Poison Ivy, Cheetah, Toyman, and an Aquaman villain who is Human Flying Fish. And we also get, the Hall of Justice. And it's explained in this comic that the Hall of Justice is a training ground for younger heroes. It's also stated that the hall is in Gotham, and that the true headquarters of the JLA is a satellite out in space, which, in point of fact, is what is going on in the Justice League comics. That the Justice League was meeting at a satellite. But anyways, this comic is very fun-filled, and it's a nice read. It's fun to read, and I enjoy it for what it is. So as a whole, with Super Friends, we have the first season that started out in 73 to 74. Then we have a gap. Then we have the show continuing from 77 to 86. And, maybe with some breaks in between and so on. But by far and away, this is the longest ongoing DC superhero show on TV. Yes, maybe it has, DC, yes, maybe it has different names and different titles. It's still the same series, and it's still, the longest ongoing animated series. And I feel we should respect that. Here we have Hanna-Barbera presenting their own version of DC heroes. Filmation had their own. This is Hanna-Barbera's contribution. And Super Friends has become very influential to other animated works and other, comics and whatnot. For the last season of Justice League Unlimited, we get a version of Legion of Doom, complete with their headquarters in the swamp. And, we even get a Legion of Doom for the last season of Batman Brave and Bold, with a team of Lex Luthor, Cheetah, and Joker. And we also have the animated movie Justice League Doom, with a type of origin, version of the Legion of Doom. We have JLA Adventure, Trapped in Time, which is a very fun Super Friends-ish animated movie, and has a Legion of Doom team here. We get Young Justice, which has the Hall of Justice. Although here, the Hall of Justice is in Washington, and it's more of the public face of the Justice League headquarters. The real headquarters being the Watchtower out in space. And in fact, recently, for Justice League versus Teen Titans, we get a version of the Hall of Justice again. And we even get a version of the Legion of Doom fighting the Justice League. So we see here how Super Friends has influenced other cartoons You know, how we get references in Justice League Unlimited, or Batman Brave and the Bold, or, you know, animated movies, and other TV series, and anime shorts, and, you know, so on. Point is, overall, Super Friends is a very good DC Silver Age series. You know, it's classic DC comics. It's classic Gardner Fox Justice League of America being presented. And I enjoy that. I don't mind the family-friendly elements. You know, I feel that the and if you feel that the showcase doesn't treat a character well, such as Aquaman, again, I say, you know, go to his other series and so forth. You know, but in the end, Super Friends is a show worth watching by any DC fan. You know, so that's my thoughts about one of my favorite superhero cartoons. And, you know, and how much I enjoy them. So for those of you who are willing to listen to me ramble on about this series, I thank you. Take care.